Okay, before I actually ask Ayala to share some of her insights, I wanted to know if any of you want to, as I had suggested before we saw the film just now, any impressionistic responses, questions, thoughts about the intentions of the director, or thoughts even broader about the significance of what you've just seen. Let's just maybe hear some brief comments or questions. Would anyone like to share? Yes, and if it's possible, please also say your name so we can relate to your comment afterwards.
My name is Bernie Simon. This film was extremely meaningful to me because in 1965, I went to Israel to spend a year as a volunteer in a group called Shirut La'am, and I was scheduled to spend my first 3 months in Emek Bet Shan, in the Bet Shan Valley, right near Sachna. The first time I heard about Sachna was at a Volkswagen dealership in Haifa, where I was having my car taken care of, and I met a young Israeli guy about the same age, and he was having his car taken care of, and he asked me what I was doing, and I told him I was going to Kibbutz Sde Eliyahu in Emek Bet Shan. This is one of the 4 religious kibbutzim in the valley. And he said, oh, if you're going to be there, you have to go to Sachna. I said, Sachna? What's Sachna? So he's trying to explain to me about the water. And my Hebrew was almost nil at the time. And his English wasn't too good. But he said, well, it's a place that's got water, and it's like Niagara. Niagara, what's Niagara? Niagara Falls, it's got the falls. In any case, I spent a lovely 3 months there on an ulpan and working, and with my kibbutz family, we would go to Sachna many times, Erev Shabbat. It was wonderful. 10 years ago, the last time I was at Sachna, there was probably more Arabs than Jews there, and many came from Jenin.
Which is nearby. Okay, thank you, Bernie. Comments? Please, miss.
I just want to say that you see people swimming in the rain, in the cold, in the winter. The water is warm all year round. I grew up in Beit Shan, so that was my backyard.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments at this point? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have friends in the kibbutz right next to it, near David, which is the patron of the place. And I've seen the place since the mid-50s. And what is interesting, what is not coming through, I think, enough in the film, and I'm sorry for that because it's an incredibly powerful experience, is the astonishment of people at seeing this wealth of water in that place. That's absolutely missing. So the idea of walking through the Emek Beit Shan and then arriving at this place, and there's actually water flowing, and in essence, it is almost wasting itself. And that is an incredibly powerful experience to see.
Wasting itself because?
I'm sorry?
Wasting itself because?
Wasted in the sense that it's not captured, it's not running. I mean, yeah, I know it is captured, it will eventually run and it will flow. I mean, it will not be lost. But at that point, over the waterfall, it looks like it is being sort of just thrown away, the Niagara that the gentleman mentioned. And that, I think, is a very, very powerful experience and a very, very important one to all the people around. There were actually, I mean, in terms of the story that came up about the ghosts that live in there, the 2 Arab gods, and there were all kinds of stories about the fact that whether or not the well and the spring were captured in the Israeli essentially count of all the water in the country, and how they were trying to hide some wells to make sure they will not be counted, so they can use them better than others, and so on. So there's a whole lot of stories there surrounding the water element itself.
Okay. Another comment at this point before I pass on to Ayala, please, Miss.
My name is Anne. I can't stay for the whole discussion, but I don't know the place, so I'm responding more to all the stories, which were so powerful, I thought. And, in the context of this, these waters, it seemed like the stories were like full of tears. And there was a sense that this was an experience of purification and of cleansing and of sort of shedding some of the pain that all these people carried in one way or another.
Almost healing in a way.
It was a healing place, yes.
Certainly one dimension. I see a hand here, and then Ayala, prepare what you want to share for a sec.
Hi, my name is Judy, and I was just wondering the comment, how representative is this film of the general Israeli population outside of these areas? So, for example, clearly this doesn't truly compare to Tel Aviv, but what other areas of Israel is this representative of? And the 15% Arab population that was quoted by the authority, how realistic is that? And does this still have does it give the impression that it's still populated mostly by Arabs?
Okay. So I'm going to afterwards, I'm going to address your questions. You might as well. But Ayala, why don't you share some of your thoughts, okay?
Okay. First, I would like to refer to the Niagara Falls imagery. Even though you find it funny that this scale of a waterfall would be compared to the Niagara, we should remember that even this scale of a waterfall is artificial, as all the landscape of this place. True, there was a water source there that has been expanded, widened, deepened, but the whole hilly surrounding and the plants, nothing of it was actually there when the Israeli authorities created this national park. So I wanted to address this artificiality of the space as part of a network of national parks that were created, imagined already in the 1951 master plan for the country. And I wanted to address this issue of artificial landscape and imaginary that, unlike in other developed countries, and here I'm paraphrasing the actual planners, national parks were not meant to preserve the nature as it exists, but to enhance imaginary possibilities, potentialities. And part of this imaginary is the imaginary of the Garden of Eden, and the way it was, this area was referred to earlier in Jewish and Talmudic sources. So it is in a way a return to a kind of a Jewish prehistory in this area before, and I'm quoting here, the Arab-Palestinian abuse of the landscape. So the idea is that agriculture by Palestinians was abusive of the territory. And then with the Jewish settlers, the idea was to enhance the possibilities, the pre-Arab possibilities of this area, to return to this Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, and also in order to introduce the larger population into the territory under the British rule. So the idea of the absorption capacity that is symbolized in this movie by the gates. So the gates are functioning and presented many times in the movie as showing this imaginary space that has to be protected. It is a haven within a haven. And you need to be cleansed from the Israeli society in the same way that people emigrated to the Israeli to Israel, to Palestine, running away. So there is a sense of a strong disillusionment in this movie. The haven that no longer functions as a haven, that fails in its imaginary idealistic sense. And many of the stories portray this idea of loss. And I commend the director for not falling into nostalgia, but commenting on this very critically, as I thought.
Thank you. I wanted to share some comments and then relate to your question, Judy. This was what could be called a shared space, de facto a shared space. But from my perspective, it wasn't necessarily an intentional shared space. And there are very few intentional shared spaces of Jewish and Arab citizens in Israel. And what do I mean by intentional shared spaces? Ones in which both groups decide out of their volition to come together for some purpose. It might be an artistic purpose, it might be a business-oriented purpose, but it's a demarcated area. On the other hand, we see a film where there are hundreds, I guess thousands of Jews and Arabs who are physically side by side, and we're actually even exposed to their stories as seen through the lens and the aesthetics that Ron Tal brings to the fore. And these are very interesting aesthetics because these characters aren't really, they're characters first of all, in the slang sense of the term, they're real characters, okay? And they're not really talking to each other. In fact, they're not even trying to talk to each other. He forms what I would call sort of a non-dialogic structure, where we're hearing stories and some intimate stories, but these stories aren't really interacting with one another. I think he's speaking to something which is not just, and maybe this begins to speak to your question, Judy. Israel is a multicultural reality without an awareness or necessarily a desire or even a capacity to create policies of multiculturalism. Those two words are very different. The word multicultural is an adjective, it's a descriptive word, but multiculturalism, which obviously can be interpreted in many, many different ways, is an ideology. And a policy of multiculturalism, whether it be in recreation parks like this, or in education, or in culture, has all sorts of implications. Now, there are pockets or islands, if you will, of multiculturalism, ism, in the words of the ideology in Israel. But as shown through Ron Tal's take on this, this is a multicultural reality and a very interesting one with, the way he brings all these stories. And again, they're juxtaposed stories. They're not interweaved stories in a way, even though technically we do come back to the couple being photographed as such. Now, who are the characters in this film? What subsets of Israelis did you see in this film? In terms of the groups, we had obviously Russian immigrants in the beginning, we had ultra-Orthodox, we had Arab Palestinian citizens, we had from other former Soviet Union societies. From where else? We had the Indians coming in, the Indian Jews, we had tourists, we had different kinds of Oriental or Arab Jews. Lower middle class, even though the group in the Park Authority characterized them as middle class.
And I just noted before that the Ethiopians are hardly represented here.
There's a young boy who falls asleep in the tower and blockade, which, by the way, sir, was in Kibbutz Nir David. That's a museum that's there. So that was the only, and also we saw it at the end. We saw the tower in the kibbutz at that last with that gleam of the sun. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment about the Wall and Stockade Museum recreation. This is just another recreation that points to the fact that the park is a Zionist recreation, a Zionist creation. So it put up in 1993 during the Oslo Accords, and in a way it kind of reminds...
The museum, you're talking about. Not the park, but the museum.
Yes, it reminds the Israelis that enjoy this natural landscape, this was not given to you on a silver platter. People fought for it. People created it. So now you have to remain, even nature cannot be enjoyed by itself. Nature has an ideological value that has to be maintained.